You know, some of you have perhaps heard me on the radio. I'm a frequent guest on the Chuck Neff Show, which is at noon on Relevant Radio. And I remember Chuck Neff once said, you know, Father Rich, we always enjoy having you on because we never know what you're going to say. To which I said, neither do I, Chuck, neither do I.
Bridging the gap for your morning drive. It's Morning Air with Sean Harriet and Wendy Weiss.
We're going to talk about faith and voting this hour, and joining us is Father Richard Simon. He's pastor at St. Lambert's Parish in Skokie, Illinois. Father Simon's expertise is in apologetics with a concentration on the early Christians, and you can hear him as a regular contributor on Searching the Word with Chuck Neff, and also his website. We should talk about that a little bit, too. Good morning, Father.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Waking up still. It takes me a long time.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I feel like in the topic we've chosen, we've kind of said to you, hey, could you stand here in front of this jet engine? And we're just going to fire up the turbines just a little bit, just see how it goes.
Yeah, from both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
We're going to talk faith and voting, and certainly as the landscape of this election changes, it seems like these issues become more and more important because we really have to be able to sort out the issues themselves, but also hopefully get a framework for how to process all this.
Yeah. It's a rough thing. The elephant in the room, of course, is abortion for us, and it is amazing what a non-issue it has become in certain areas. That it's just assumed that it's a right, it's always going to be here, it's always going to stay there. Well, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but it occurred to me that abortion, the arguments for the legitimacy of abortion are exactly the same as the arguments for the legitimacy of slavery. You ever thought about that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's unfortunate, but it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. That's what they said about slavery. And it's an economic necessity. How are we going to feed all these mouths? Well, of course, slavery was an economic necessity for slave owners. And the worst, the most heinous argument about slavery was, well, it was really better for the slaves. Because instead of growing up in the darkness of pagan Africa, which of course was not true, Christians had been in Africa since the beginning, or Christians in Africa before there were Christians in England, instead of growing up in the darkness of pagan Africa, they would grow up in snug little slave cottages in the United States and be taught the Christian faith. It was really better for the slaves. They say that about abortion, that it's really better for the children, because who wants to bring a child into a loveless world? And the reason that the arguments were the same for slavery and abortion is because abortion is a form of slavery, the worst form of slavery. It's saying that body growing inside a woman belongs to the woman. Slavery is to say, your body belongs to me and I may do with it as I please. And so it's slavery amplified. And it attacks the very dignity of personhood. I may not use another person for my own advantage. And that's what's going on. That's why it's so evil. And I think that people who are progressive, so-called, don't see that. I don't know one person who would be pro-abortion and pro-slavery. But in fact, abortion is slavery. And it's the worst kind of slavery. It's the enslavement of the defenseless, the completely defenseless. So it's just such a huge issue.
It is interesting that aside from Obama's sort of flip answer to Rick Warren, there really hasn't been any discussion of abortion during this campaign.
None to speak of. none to speak of, because I think because it is potentially as divisive an issue as is slavery. You know, in slavery, at least slaves themselves could speak. They could speak for themselves, whereas children can't speak for themselves. Unborn children can't speak for themselves. And I just think that, you know, we are in this country paying for the horror of slavery to this day in our social structure. Much of this election has to do with that. Can we elect someone of African roots because of the latent racism in our society? Well, it isn't always so latent. And then there's the reverse racism. I'm sure there will be people who will vote for Mr. Obama because of the color of his skin, and there will be people who will vote against him because of the color of his skin, which is just immaterial. But we are racists on both sides of that divide in certain areas, and it's just tearing us apart still. If the heritage of slavery was so bad, how long are we going to pay for the heritage of abortion? It's just so distressing, and we just don't want to talk about it.
Well, and Father, what's so incredible is that you see people who are clearly intelligent. I mean, they're clearly well educated, but they can't see how their pro-abortion arguments, if you expand that right, if you basically say, you know, a life that is this tiny or this insignificant, it's really not worth living, or it's really not worth saving, or bringing up, as you said, in a loveless world or a loveless relationship. It doesn't take much to extend that into the hospital room.
Yeah.
You know, the sick, the infirm, and they never seem to see that.
The aged. I mean, think
Exactly.
of that in that argument. Oh, it's so sad to live in a loveless world, so that child shouldn't be born. Well, think of the untold numbers of senior citizens who are essentially alone in nursing homes. And you hear about that all the time. Well, they got no one, so, well, let's just increase the medication a little bit. And every once in a while, some so-called mercy killer is outed in the press. And oh, good Lord, it's just, you know, you're right. It just it makes an object of the person. And when other people make decisions for me, you know, they didn't ask the slaves in Africa. They didn't ask free men in Africa, would you rather be a slave in the United States? Wouldn't that be nice? They didn't ask them. They dragged them off kicking and screaming.
It's 14 minutes after the hour. Our guest this morning, Father Richard Simon. We're talking about faith and voting. Father Simon is pastor at St. Lambert's Parish in Skokie, Illinois. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back. If you have a question or a comment for Father, 877-766-3777, 877-766-3777. We'll be back with Father Simon and you on Morning Air. 17 minutes after the hour, our guest is Father Richard Simon. We're talking about faith and voting. If you have a question or a comment, please come on in. 877-766-3777, 877-766-3777.
And Father, we're going to get to the voting issue here in a minute, but we were talking a little bit about the life issue, abortion, and also euthanasia. Got a thought from Carol in Appleton, Wisconsin, listening to Relevant Radio 1050 AM. Hi, Carol. You're on the air with Father Simon.
Hi, Father.
Good morning.
I've been a nurse for 25 years. Most of my career has been in long-term care. I was a nurse manager for a dementia unit for a long time, and I have never heard the comment that a patient doesn't have any family, so let's just increase their medicine.